see him as a huckster, a P.T. Barnum shyster. More than anything, I think the thing that matters to Donald Trump is that drives him is his ego. Now, what that means is that in office, should it come to that, I don't think he's necessarily somebody who's going to do anything of the evil sort that Hitler did. But I do see a vacuum created in the same way that I saw one with Ronald Reagan, who was not a deep thinker, not a wide thinker, just had this really firmly held idea that the government should be made littler. Now, what happens with that vacuum is smart people in Washington fill that vacuum, and you're never sure who they are, and they may be, for example, the kind of people who filled the W administration, and then you get problems.
I'm much more convinced by the comparisons with Berlusconi, actually, not Hitler, that, you've got that sort of risible but populist appeal, a kind of television background, and ego to burn. And, a lot of people in Italy laughed at Berlusconi's political ambitions until they came true, and then they found that the country was being, run just the way you'd expect it to have been run by, the guy that had the banga parties or whatever.
Right. Is it surprising? I mean, can you remember any other election, not just in the US, but anywhere where there's been this level of chipping in from other foreign leaders? I mean, I've got a list here. I mean, international world leaders who have made negative comments about Donald Trump include Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, the German Vice Chancellor, British Prime Minister David Cameron.
No, because normally it's a convention that you don't.
That's right, and especially at this. I mean, he's not even the nominee.
I suspect it's a world intervention in disguise. It's like, America, we need to talk. We're here because we care about you. But by the same token, I think there's a subtext to this. A lot of people have said, and admittedly they tend to be, critics on the left and more radical critics, that all of the conditions exist in America for a kind of fascist state. Not Nazi Germany, not concentration camps and so on, but there is a pre-fascist element to the way that society and that economy is organised. Basically, fascism is really about corporate might and military muscle in alliance via the state. And,
arguably they've had that since the Vietnam War.
Yeah, so America, the terrifying thing about Trump is not so much that Trump might become president, it's that American politics and political discourse has got to the stage where that we're even discussing Donald Trump as a presidential candidate. That's kind of amazing to me.
And until 9/11, the thing I'd always admired about America was that there seemed to be a courtesy and an agreement to disagree. And I might be romanticising that, because I suppose if you look at sort of what happened in the 60s with the generation gap and Watts riots and that sort of thing, it wasn't it wasn't all sweetness and light. But there was something before 9/11 that I thought meant, and maybe before Fox News for that matter, that meant that people would respect another person's point of view to an extent that just doesn't seem to exist now.
I think they also need to respect the republic, That's the whole point. Yeah. It's a republic, not a dictatorship.
Coming up rapidly towards 5 o'clock. So just finally, big story today, obviously, in New Zealand, and particularly for cricket fans. Martin Crowe is being farewelled as we speak, or it was earlier this afternoon. The funeral today. Any thoughts on the passing of the man?
Well, I felt it a little personally. I went to school with Martin, and he was a year behind me. His name was up in lights a lot more than mine at Auckland Grammar, I can tell you that. And he was, it's always just very disturbing when you see someone from your own generation go like that. A remarkable cricket player, as everybody who knows more about the sport tells me, and a complicated guy who seemed to be coming to terms with his complicatedness, and I really respected and admired that. So I can understand why there's a lot of feeling out there about Martin.
I saw a little of the service this afternoon, and they talked about the decades of possibility that didn't happen, and that is the sadness, because he did new things, and he did them as in an accomplished way as he did the first as cricket.
Yeah,
so it's sad.
Yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Finlay.
You did a fine job, Jeremy.
And thank you all. Jim will be back on Monday. This has been the panel, and we're coming up to the news at 5 o'clock with the headlines. Have a good afternoon.
Kia ora everyone, welcome to Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm John Campbell, and on behalf of the Checkpoint team, thank you for joining us. Tonight, a farewell to Martin Crowe. We ask credit rating agency Standard & Poor's whether Fonterra is hurting as much as the farmers who provide it with milk. Peter Dunn on when you can import restricted drugs. Is there a loophole in the Act if you have a prescription? Will trading banks explain why they haven't passed on the Reserve Bank's cut to the official cash rate? Syria, 5 years after the hope of the Arab Spring, and Vanuatu 1 year after Cyclone Pam. All of that and more over the next 90 minutes. But first, here's Leilani Mamoisia with RNZ News.
Kia ora, good evening. The police minister says she's open to holding an inquiry into guns after a massive haul of weapons was found in a drug operation. Police yesterday raided a house in Takanini where they seized more than a dozen guns, including military-style AK-47s and M16s. The Labour Party is calling for an inquiry into the role of guns in New Zealand society. The Police Minister, Judith Collins, is also supporting the idea.
My concern was not with legitimate firearms holders, but with those who have violent criminal records, who somehow seem to end up holding guns that they clearly don't have a licence for.
Judith Collins says the issue could be taken up by a select committee of Parliament. National house sales have hit their highest level in 9 years as activity surges outside of Auckland. The Real Estate Institute says sales rose 6% to nearly 7,300 in February compared with the same period a year earlier, while the median price increased 5% to $450,000. Sales fell 18% in Auckland following tougher rules on investors and foreign buyers. While Auckland is slowing, the chief executive of the Institute, Colleen Milne, says other areas are not.
Waikato up 16%, Hawke's Bay up 14%, Central Otago Lakes is up 13%. So right across the country we're just seeing strong sales growth and strong volume.
Colleen Milne says this is the busiest time of the year for the industry and she expects lower interest rates will further fuel demand. Rural fire crews are damping down 2 fires in Canterbury and monitoring the scene of a third blaze. They're continuing to work at West Darfield, where a fire destroyed a home last night, and at Hanna Springs, where a fire flared up yesterday. West of Lake Coleridge, firefighters are monitoring a fire where deep-seated hotspots were still burning this morning. More than 300 people are still without power in Otago after severe winds cut electricity last night. Aurora Energy says power has been restored to more than 7,000 customers since last night, with repairs continuing. The company says just over 100 people will remain without power overnight while poles are replaced. A medical specialist says important changes to cervical screening of women are being rushed. The Health Minister, Jonathan Coleman, has said the primary test for cervical cancer will change in 2018. He said it will change from a liquid cytology test that involves analysing cells to detect changes that could indicate an increased risk of cervical cancer to a test that screens for the human papillomavirus, or HPV. HPV causes 90% of cervical cancers. A Dunedin cytopathologist, Peter Fitzgerald, says HPV screening shows promise, but the switch is being made too quickly.
3-week consultation period, for a complex issue like this, it's derisory really. And it's unfortunate, because basically something like cervical screening or any screening needs really good buy-in from all the stakeholders.
Dr Fitzgerald says the decision could reduce the current level of protection and increase unnecessary referrals for further assessment and treatment. Mourners have packed Auckland's Holy Trinity Cathedral to farewell cricketing legend Martin Crowe. Crowe died last week, aged 53, after a long battle with lymphoma. Many of those who spoke talked of Crowe's incredible sporting talent and achievements, but they also spoke of a funny man, a prankster who was passionate and clever. His casket was farewelled from the grounds by a haka from his old school, Auckland Grammar. The people of Japan are remembering the victims of the massive earthquake and tsunami which killed nearly 20,000 people exactly 5 years ago. The tsunami also crippled a nuclear plant at Fukushima, where meltdowns in 3 reactors spread radiation over a wide area of countryside, contaminating water, food and air. The BBC's Rupert Wingfield-Hayes is in Rikuzen-Takuta, a coastal town that suffered almost total devastation in 2011.
Underneath me here is what used to be the city centre of the old port city of Rikuzen-Takata. But after it was swept away 5 years ago by that giant tsunami, they decided never again. And so they have brought in millions and millions of tons of earth and rock to fill in this area to a depth of 10 to 15 metres higher than the old land. And this is where they're going to build the new city.
Rupert Wingfield-Hayes in Japan. And to sports now, the New Zealand golfer Stephen Alker has roared up the leaderboard at the New Zealand Open in Queenstown, shooting a 5-under par second round 67 to move into third place. The Australian Matthew Griffin had the round of the day with a 7-under 65 to move into a share of first place at 8-under par alongside Japan's Hideto Tanihara. Alker's round included 6 birdies and a bogey.
It's been freezing this morning, so it took a couple of holes to get going, but yeah, once I kind of hit, I think it was 13, 14 that stretched through there, and I started playing really nicely, and made a few more putts today. I think that was the difference. Nice day tomorrow, and we'll be in the thick of it.
New Zealand golfer Stephen Alker. And the Hurricanes need more from their experienced players if they're to threaten the Blues in their Super Rugby game at Eden Park tonight. The Hurricanes are without captain and All Black hooker Dane Coles for the 3rd straight week because of injury. Last year's finalists have been beaten by the ACT Brumbies and the Highlanders. The Hurricanes coach Chris Boyd says misfiring All Black winger Julian Savea is due for a big game.
Julian probably would be pleased to get more out of himself, so he's coming to his game, but he's not right on top of it yet. But one thing we do know about Julian is that the more he plays, the better he gets.
Meanwhile, the Blues have a revamped side after their loss to the Crusaders, including a completely new front row. And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, we celebrate the sound of Philadelphia. That's after 11. Country Life meets a share-milking couple who haven't given up on dairy. Well, they probably don't have much choice. HDU rocks the King's Arms in Auckland. Sam Charlton brings the sport. She's part of the Kiwi women's hockey team that just gave world number 2 Argentina a good run for its money. And there's a Sonic Tonic dedicated to the ladies on Nights after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And the Met-Service forecast till midnight tomorrow. Northland, there's showers clearing tomorrow morning, then fine. Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula, a few showers about northern Auckland, Great Barrier Island and eastern Coromandel this evening. Waikato to Kapiti, also Bay of Plenty and the central high country, fine apart from some cloudy periods. Wellington and Gisborne to Wairarapa, scattered showers clearing and becoming fine tomorrow. Nelson and Marlborough, except the Kaikoura coast, fine apart from a few showers about Golden Bay. Kaikoura Coast and Canterbury, showers clearing from the south today and becoming fine. Otago and Southland, fine apart from cloud about the Catlins, and Dunedin until tonight. Bulla to Fiordland, isolated showers about northern Bulla, cloudy periods tomorrow and a few showers about Westland and Fiordland. Chatham Islands, showers, some heavy, and gale southwesterlies easing tomorrow. And I'll be back with news headlines at 5:30. It's now 5:09.
Thank you very much indeed, Leilani. Former New Zealand cricket captain Martin Crowe has been farewelled at a warm and colourful ceremony at Auckland's Holy Trinity Cathedral. Crowe died last week, aged 53, from lymphoma. He had helped plan his own funeral. New Zealand cricketers from many different eras came to pay their respects, and Crow's famous Hollywood cousin, Russell, made an unexpected but very welcome appearance. Rowan Quinn was there as they farewelled the man many knew as Hogan.
The word great is often overused and sometimes misused.
Well, that's a beautiful shot from Martin Crowe. 4 runs away through the covers.
There are some good players.
Oh, beautiful shot.
Hundreds packed the Holy Trinity Cathedral to remember a friend, a loved one and a sporting hero. They heard tales of one of the most gifted sportsmen the country's seen, but also of a warm and loving father, a thoughtful mentor and a mischievous prankster. Jeff Crowe said his passionate brother was often misunderstood but was clever and insightful. He spoke of the ultra-competitive streak between them that sometimes extended to their famous cousin.
A beautiful mind, indeed. And what a brilliant film, Russ. Marty and Russell spent some special times together, especially many years ago, when both were setting off on their amazing journeys. I do recall a wager they had as to who would be the most famous. Today only, Russ, Marty might be just in front.
Martin Crowe's body lay in a bright orange casket, a favourite colour. He'd designed it himself, and it was adorned with daughter Emma's birth date, his wedding date, a silver fern, a butterfly and the sun. His wife Lorraine said while the world knew him as a famous cricketer, to her he was a soulmate. She loved the cheeky humour of the man who had more clothes and shoes than her, and said he showed her what love truly was.
Our partnership has been about having fun and much love. In fact, we had a party for 2 most days. We never tired of one another. We would go away on holidays and spend the entire trip just on our own, completely happy, needing nothing more than the other. Yes, what we had was very precious, and I will be forever grateful.
Ian Smith, Crowe's former teammate, touring roommate and later colleague at Sky Sports, talked about the passionate sporting hero. Children, he said, wanted to be him. Adults wanted to see him.
I saw him a couple of times in the last few months as things were shutting down. I won't remember him that way. I will always see a man at the crease, a great man. White helmet, silver fern on badge, headband trailing out the back of it, long sleeve shirt, all uniform and gear in pristine condition. And then I'll see him playing the most perfect straight drive, back past the bowler, always along the ground, down to the boundary for 4. In cricket, it doesn't get more beautiful.
Black Caps Martin Guptill and Ross Taylor are in India and sent a video tribute. Taylor described how he became dear friends with the man who mentored him after describing him as a dirty slogger at the crease. He said Crowe, who gave him the nickname Too Easy, was wickedly funny and could be brutally honest.
In the words of Hogan himself, we should smile when stumps are drawn and be grateful for the day's cricket. Thank you, Hogan. Thank you for the journey. Thank you for the privilege. Love, Too Easy.
Russell and Jeff Crowe led the pallbearers as they took Crowe's casket through an Auckland Grammar School Guard of Honour, pausing for the school's kapahaka group to honour him. And in a final touch, mourners laid orange and yellow petals on the casket before it drove away again to the sound of the haka. In Auckland for Checkpoint, Rowan Quinn.
Coming up to 14 minutes past 5. The Police Minister says she's open to holding an inquiry into guns after a massive haul of weapons was found in a drug operation. Police arrested a man yesterday with a pistol by his bed and more than $500,000 worth of drugs and cash. Hours later, police made their way into a heavily fortified warehouse in Whitty in South Auckland, where they found not 1 but 2 clan labs used to manufacture methamphetamine. That same afternoon, police raided a house in nearby Takanini, where they seized more than a dozen guns, including AK-47s and M16s stashed in the ceiling. Muriel Baker asks how they ended up there.
Licensed gun seller Jim Yates has seen photos of the seized weapons and offered his thoughts about how military-style guns like these could have wound up here.
The AK-47, that would have had to have been imported as a restricted firearm. if it's semi-automatic. If it's a full auto weapon, it was definitely brought in as a collectible, which lots have been brought in for collections. Some of the best collections in the world are in New Zealand.
But Jim Yates says there are tens of thousands of similar guns called ARs that are used by hunters and in competitions and are relatively easy to import and sell. And once an AR is here and in the wrong hands, Mr. Yates says they can be easily modified into a military-style semi-automatic weapon like the one seized yesterday, and that's not tracked by the police.
That gun was probably legally purchased from, one of 100 different dealers that sell ARs in the country. There's nothing in the country to track ACAT firearms when they're sold. Personally, I would just assume every firearm that's ever transferred from anybody is automatically transferred through the police. It would just be an easier way to keep track of everything. And I've just been told that they're understaffed and undermanned and they just don't have the energy or the resources.
The Labour Party's police spokesperson, Stuart Nash, says over the past year the police have confiscated more than 1,500 weapons. He wants an inquiry into the role of guns in New Zealand society.
What we don't know is what role guns are actually playing. Are criminals more likely to carry guns than they were 10 years ago? I suspect they are. My gut tells me that that we have a real problem in our society. So this is about disarming criminals, and it's holding the criminal element that are using guns more and more in our society to task.
And the Police Minister, Judith Collins, agrees.
I am absolutely concerned about this, and my concern is not with legitimate firearms holders, but with those who have violent criminal records, who somehow seem to end up holding guns that they clearly don't have a licence for. So something's going on, and I want to find out what's going on.
Ms Collins says she supports the idea of an inquiry by a select committee, and though she can't force them to take that on, she says there are other options if it doesn't happen. The man that led to the seizure, Shane Hannon, was charged over the possession and supply of methamphetamine and the unlawful possession of a pistol. The police say further charges haven't been ruled out. For Checkpoint, Muriel Baker.
17 minutes past 5. A Christchurch family who lost their home in yesterday's scrub fire are unsure if their insurer will pay out on it. Roger Knowles, who lives on Homebush Road in Darfield, watched his family farm burn yesterday afternoon. The fire jumped paddocks, setting hedgerows on fire and then burning their home, which had been in the family for a century, right to the ground. Roger's son Graham says because the fire was part of a consented burn-off, which had been underway for 3 weeks, he's not sure who will pay. Earlier today, he stood in front of what used to be his father's home, his family home, and told me what happened.
That's the family home. Your dad lives here by himself. Mum died a few years previous. So this is his little hideaway. So yeah, it's all gone.
Yeah, what happened?
There was a controlled burn-off which has been going on for the last 3 weeks on the Deans's Hills, probably about 3 miles behind us. And that got out of control at about 3:30, and I saw it getting out of control, so I grabbed Dad out of the house and we went for a drive to watch it. And as we watched it, it jumped a few fences and ended up in our property, so I was trying to put it out with sacks and things, and then looked back towards the house and we could see that the fire had jumped, literally had jumped paddocks without touching the paddocks, had just gone from hedge line to hedge line, jumping good 700-800 metres at a time. And it did that in about 4 bounds before it hit the house.
Gosh, that's like an Aussie fire, it was moving so fast. Given the forecasts were for really strong winds yesterday, should there have been a controlled burn-off in those circumstances?
I mean, it has been going for a long time, 3 odd weeks up there, maybe even 4 weeks. They were milling up there and they're just cleaning up. They reckon they had it under control. But, you know, realistically, there has been a fire ban on. I know it got taken off for a while, but it's back on again. It's very disappointing, and well, I don't know what we're going to do from here. Well, it's all up to insurance now, but it's wrecked my father's life for sure. Now he's into his late 70s, and this is his only little spot. He doesn't want to move, away from here. So I don't know what's going to happen.
It was moving so fast. Did you and your dad manage to get anything out? Any of the kind of really special things you try and take in such circumstances?
No, we had one shot at grabbing some stuff, and all we managed to get, well, we got the cars and the boats and the things like that, and then Dad rushed inside and just grabbed accounts for the farm, and he said he didn't even think about photos or anything like that. One thing that's really going to hurt with Dad, another thing is he has a great agate collection, which is gemstones, probably some of the best in Canterbury, and they've all exploded into 1,000 pieces. So that's what he's been collecting for the last 40 or 50 years. So as he says, he's going to have to start again now and go look for some more.
Graham, I'm so sorry about that. How fast was the fire moving? You said it was jumping in tight paddocks.
Well, to give you a bit of an idea how much wind, there was a helicopter, a big helicopter with an empty monsoon coming from Christchurch to get here, and it was hardly making headway into the wind. It was hardly moving at all. So it was just huge. It's hard to explain. It moved so quickly. We were putting out a fire, and within probably 7 or 8 minutes, it was at our house a mile away.
Wow, how's your dad today? He must just be in a state of shock, is he?
Oh, I think we all are. Yeah, the rest of the family's starting to turn up, and close friends are here with coffee and things. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see where we go in the next few weeks. That's for sure.
Your dad's insured. The property was insured.
We're insured, but this is going to be an interesting one because being a consented burn-off, who pays for this? Public liability. The person, Tim Deans, who had the burn-off, I don't know. We've got assessors coming out shortly, so a lot of questions will be answered then.
Graham Knowles talking in front of what was his family home. 22 minutes past 5. Coming up, why a fisherman's been told he must give up his knowledge of the best fishing spot to his former employer, and scientists say it's time for New Zealand to take urgent action to curb agricultural emissions. We'd love to hear from you in any way you choose. You can text us on 2101. You can email us checkpoint@radionz.co.nz, and our Facebook and Twitter address is @checkpointrnz. Yesterday, the Reserve Bank lowered the official cash rate by 0.25%. We all know that. We covered it at length last night. The four major trading banks immediately didn't pass it on. Lending rates have not been lowered. In fact, the only bank we're aware of to have passed on the full cut to its customers is the small retail bank cooperative. Now, given the major banks have been making record profits, we approached ANZ, Westpac, BNZ and ASB and invited each one of them onto Checkpoint to discuss why they're not lowering their interest rates. Fair question, compelling public interest, we thought they'd front. ASB and Westpac say they're not in a position to provide comment today. We haven't heard back from BNZ or ANZ at all. So we approached the Bankers Association, that's the body that represents the banks and is sometimes their public face. They couldn't provide anyone to talk to us either. So just before we move on, we thought we'd remind you of their latest profits, since they appear to be blaming the cost of offshore funding for not passing on the full benefit of interest rate cuts to customers. Westpac New Zealand made a full year profit of $916 million. ASB recorded a net profit of $859 million. Bank of New Zealand clocked up a net profit of just over $1 billion, and ANZ's annual profit was $1.77 billion. In total, well over $4 billion, and not a single person from any of them available to talk. 24 minutes past 5 on Checkpoint. Scientists say new research blaming farming for recent rises in the greenhouse gas methane levels show it's time for New Zealand to take urgent action to curb agricultural emissions. The findings show agriculture, especially in China, India and Southeast Asia, has been the biggest source of methane since 2007, not fossil fuel production, as previously thought. Ruth Hill reports.
Lead researcher Heinrich Schäfer says the surprising finding does not mean the fossil fuel industry can take the back seat.
Ultimately, we have to decrease all greenhouse gas emissions to zero. That's what has been agreed in Paris by all governments of the world. So the fossil fuel emissions don't get a get-out-of-jail-free card. But for us in New Zealand, really what we have to tackle are the agricultural greenhouse gas emissions.
Methane accounts for about a fifth of the global warming experience to date, but about half of New Zealand's greenhouse gas emissions come from agriculture, our biggest export earner. Cynical environmentalists allege this is the main reason agriculture is exempt from New Zealand's emissions trading scheme. But Federated Farmers climate change spokesman Anders Crowfoot says just because agriculture isn't part of the ETS does not mean it's not doing anything. He says the industry has invested heavily in research into methane reduction and is already the most efficient in the world.
People do have to eat, and if New Zealand doesn't produce it, it'll get produced somewhere else in the world, and many other parts of the world, for every kilo of product they produce, they actually emit more methane than New Zealand does. So that's actually not particularly good on a global basis.
The Agricultural Greenhouse Gas Research Centre is using breeding, feeds, genetics, vaccines and methane inhibitors that can be added to animal feed. Its Deputy Director, Andy Reisinger, says methane-producing microbes are the same in animals as diverse as cows, sheep, goats and camels, which means one product could meet every country's needs.
And that's really the big gain here, in the sense that New Zealand emissions are still small on a global scale, but if we can make a difference to help the world as a whole move towards reducing agricultural greenhouse gas emissions, then that would make a major impact.
Its research partner, the Pastoral Greenhouse Gas Research Consortium, which is jointly funded by industry and government, has the job of coming up with commercially viable products. Its head, Mark Aspin, says the vaccine and inhibitor have the potential to cut methane emissions by up to 20%, but they're 7 to 10 years away from hitting the market. The work on low methane emitting sheep breeds is about a year from completion, but Mr Aspin admits farmers may not immediately select for that particular trait.
Farmers will do things that drive their business, and at the moment carbon cost is not part of that equation, but they will still, even in the carbon cost world, they'll still have to look after their productivity.
Victoria University climate scientist James Renwick says the new research is further proof that agriculture should be part of the emissions trading scheme.
Just because it's hard, though, I don't think that's an argument for letting agriculture off the hook. Agricultural emissions are obviously really important, and by putting a financial incentive on the agriculture sector to do something, that's how you're going to get movement, I think.
Professor Renwick says time is short if the world is to avoid irreversible climate change, but unfortunately that message does not appear to have sunk in with policymakers. For Checkpoint, Ruth Hill.
A fisherman has been told he must give up his knowledge of the best fishing spots to his former company, a decision that could have disturbing ramifications for the fishing industry. Well, for hobbyists, really, I suspect. John Edmonston used his 40 years of experience of harvesting oysters to enter specific coordinates into the navigation system of a bluff oyster dredge while working for the fishing giant Sanford. But when he left in 2014, Sanford would only give him a copy of the information and refuse to wipe it. Mr Edmonston complained to the Employment Relations Authority, but it ruled Sanford was within its rights because it technically co-owned the data. The editor of Skipper magazine, Keith Ingram, joins us on the phone now. Keith, I'm chuckling away at this, but I suspect you regard this as very serious.
Yes, thank you, John. It is very serious. It's a little bit like in the media you consider copyright laws.
Absolutely.
And it's a little bit like that. This judgment has far-reaching ramifications for the industry. The skipper's knowledge. Just step back a wee bit. Seamen or seafarers, skippers, were paid for their navigation skills to move ships from one end of the world to the other. Fishermen were paid for their knowledge they acquired over years and years of experience to go out and catch fish and bring it in for the owners and so forth. That's why they're called share fishermen. And these marks are all part of that knowledge which is gained over years and years of experience. What's happened here, you've got a company now who is refusing to give back the marks or delete them out of the machine and has got a ruling that says it doesn't have to. So it could technically go and employ a lesser qualified, experienced skipper, give him all the marks and say, go catch oysters or go catch fish.
But that's inevitably what they're going to do, I would have thought. But if Mr Edmonston was working for Sanford when he used these marks, when he put these marks down, when he said, these are the spots, let's go there, doesn't Sanford have access to that?
Only if Mr Sanford went out and got them in the first place.
Even if he was on the payroll, when he did it, even if he was on the payroll? Yeah,
no, they should. That sort of knowledge is copyright knowledge, and I believe it should stay with the skipper.
But okay, so hold on a second.
That's why he's employable.
No, this is fascinating, because if we look at copyright, this interview that we're doing now, I'm doing it, but Radio New Zealand owns it, right? Isn't that analogous?
Yeah, you could say that, but then you're not out.
I'm not in Foveaux Strait.
Putting all your knowledge, you're not in the middle of Foveaux Strait or down the Southern Ocean or wherever. Traditionally in the industry, the marks have always been the property of the skipper. And there's been a respect. You could give them, you could bequeath them, you would share them with friends, or you might share them with company people. But that was the skipper's choice. In this case, he didn't exercise that choice to give them or anything else. Sanford just took them or refused to give him access to copy them down for himself. The court has actually said they must give him access now to download the data, but they can keep also the data, which is different to what has traditionally been expected and done in the fishing industry and in fact in the marine industry.
Keith Ingram, who's the editor of Skipper magazine, thank you so much. So marks are special and marks are different, Keith is saying. We'd love your feedback on that. What do you think? Text 2101 or email us checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. That dispute went all the way to the Employment Relations Authority, who ruled Sanford was within its right to keep access to those marks. Coming up on Checkpoint, dairy farmers are feeling the pain. But is Fonterra itself feeling as much pain? We ask a credit rating agency. And answers are still being sought a year on for the disappearance of Invercargill schoolboy Mike Zhao Beckenridge and his stepfather. You remember that car over the cliff into the ocean? Were they in it? That is still the question. After 6, Peter Dunn to talk about cannabis as medicine. But before all of that, here's Leilani Mamoisia with RNZ News Headlines.
The police minister says she's open to holding an inquiry into guns after a massive haul of weapons was found in a drug operation. Officers yesterday raided a house in Takanini in Auckland, seizing more than a dozen guns, including military-style AK-47s and M16s. The minister, Judith Collins, says her concern is over people with violent criminal records who end up holding guns they don't have a licence for. The officer who suffered a hand injury during the Kawero police shootings has been discharged from hospital. Another officer who suffered a head injury remains in Waikato Hospital, where his condition is stable. 2 others have been discharged. National house sales have hit their highest level in 9 years as activity surges outside Auckland. The Real Estate Institute says sales rose 6% to nearly 7,300 in February compared with the same period a year earlier. The median price increased 5% to $450,000. Sales fell 18% in Auckland following tougher rules on investors and foreign buyers. Ceremonies are being held today on the 5th anniversary of Japan's massive earthquake and tsunami. About 18,000 people were killed and a nuclear reactor was crippled. A Dunedin medical specialist, Peter Fitzgerald, says important changes to cervical screening of women are being rushed. The Health Minister has said the primary test for cervical cancer will change in 2018. Mourners have packed Auckland's Holy Trinity Cathedral to farewell cricketing legend Martin Crowe. The country's greatest batsman died last week after a long battle with lymphoma. New Zealand cricketers from many different eras came to pay their respects, and Crowe's actor cousin Russell made an unexpected appearance. And it's 26 to 6.
Thank you very much indeed, Leilani. See you at 6 o'clock. Let's turn to business news now with Jonathan Mitchell, who joins us from RNZ's head office and the Wellington newsroom. Jonathan, employment indicator for manufacturing heads into contraction level. Why is the note I have written in front of me? I'd just like you to explain the question before you even answer it.
Employment is a sub-context indicator of the main manufacturing indicator for February. Look, that monthly data as a whole, performance and manufacturing index, eased just a touch, 2 points in February last month to 56. Now look, a reading above 50 indicates expansion. So as a whole, in essence, manufacturing is still growing. But you have to look a bit deeper, John, and the employment sub-index fell into contraction level, the first time it's done that since December 2014. An economist we spoke to, Doug Steele at BNZ, said, when they were conducting this survey, that was at the height of worry, and he called it fear factor around global markets. So I guess manufacturers were just a little bit cautious when that was being taken, and they may have just paused a little bit on their hiring intentions. But look, Doug Steele did point out that the volatility around global markets, his words, dialed back. And that's, I guess, in regards to announcements we've had from overseas. China has come out in the past week, outlined their growth plans for the coming year, 6.5% to 7%. Markets have got a bit of a steer there. So this is just 1 month's data, and it's come back into contraction. But I think as a whole, you're going to have to see a trend before, if there's anything to get too worried about, and whether it's more than just global uncertainty affecting employers in the manufacturing industry's decisions on what they do.
Jonathan, we thought reporting season was over, but there was another big result today, right?
That's right. We had the Warehouse Group. They followed on from Briscoe's yesterday. Now, the Warehouse had a strong first half profit, $57.2 million. That's off the back of higher sales. There was growth right across the board. The Warehouse, the Red Sheds, Warehouse Stationery, I think they're blue, Noel Leeming and Torpedo 7. But like Briscoe Group, they outlined some of the challenges, and one of them is the low New Zealand dollar. When the dollar's low, it costs more to import products into New Zealand. So that's a key headwind. And the Warehouse Group outlined that could affect margins. And so that's just one thing that they've highlighted today. They are expecting stronger sales, though, over the coming year.
Jonathan, how did the markets end the week?
Markets were obviously surprised the Reserve Bank's decision yesterday to cut interest rates here. We had the European Central Bank come out today. There was initial cheer that the ECB would cut rates and extend and expand their quantitative easing program. There was a little bit of news that followed that might be it. They might leave it there and not cut any further. So markets dropped after that. Back home, the NZX 50 index still in the record zone, up 7 points, ends the week at 6515. And the dollar trading at 66.93 US cents and 89.34 Australian. And that is business for this week.
Thank you very much indeed, Jonathan. Jonathan Mitchell, our business reporter from Wellington. Have a fantastic weekend. Late last year, credit rating agency Standard & Poor's downgraded Fonterra's credit rating from A to A-. But when this week Fonterra announced its forecast milk price was $3.90 per kilo, down from an already low $4.15, Standard & Poor's reacted with a statement saying that had, and I quote, no immediate impact on the rating. The statement went on. The lower price forecast supports our view of the group's flexibility in adjusting the milk price paid to farmers in times of market weakness. Standard & Poor's appeared to be saying that as long as Fonterra passed the weakness on, it wasn't yet impacting negatively on the cooperative itself. Low milk prices do, of course, represent lower costs for Fonterra. Obviously, milk is their biggest cost. So we called Standard & Poor's for some clarification around this. Is the pain farmers are now feeling as painful for Fonterra itself? Here's Paul Draffin, Senior Analyst from Standard & Poor's.
No, that's quite a different thing. So from a ratings perspective, there is the amount of the pain of the fall in the milk price that Fonterra wears, and there's the amount that is passed through to the farmers. And that's very important in the way we think about it. What we've seen here is that Fonterra continues to pass through the lower prices to farmers. So it is a very difficult environment for farmers. There's no doubt about that. But I think what the company is very focused on is maintaining a strong balance sheet and ensuring the long-term health of the cooperative.
In other words, you want them to pass lower prices on.
Certainly a key factor in the way we assess the co-op is its ability to pass through lower prices to farmers. Now, that is not the only mechanism by which they can return funds to farmers. The vast majority of the farmers are paid-up shareholders of the company, so they also receive dividends. So an improved operating performance of the company can also benefit farmers, but certainly from the milk price point of view, that is something that the rating anticipates that those lower prices will be passed through to farmers.
Is perversely there a situation where input costs, i.e. milk, when they are lower, are better for Fonterra as a business because it's not shelling out huge amounts of money for its core product, which is raw milk?
That's certainly correct, and that is, as dividend recipients of the company, most of the farmers are, yes, that does improve the profitability of the company and therefore can potentially lead to higher dividend payments, which can help to ease some of the pain of the lower milk price. So that is, a benefit of their model in that they are, the consumer product business part of their operations do benefit from lower milk prices.
See, this is confusing, isn't it? Because on the one hand, the farmers need a milk payout. On the other hand, the farmers are shareholders. And so their interests aren't necessarily the same, are they?
Well, for those farmers, the majority of them are both. They'll be looking at their total payout, which will be a combination of the payout under the farm gate price and dividends. So they'll be looking at those two things together. And for the majority of farmers, that's what they're focused on. So lower milk prices will help the profitability of the broader company and help to improve profitability, and that can then lead to higher dividends.
So that's Standard & Poor's take on it all. We'd love your feedback on that. Text 2101 or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. We've got some feedback coming in too, some really interesting responses tonight. It is 18 and a half minutes to 6. This Sunday marks 1 year since the Invercargill schoolboy Mike Zhao Beckenridge and his stepfather John Beckenridge went missing. But still no one knows what happened to the pair. The James Huggis College pupil was picked up by his stepfather at lunchtime on March 13th last year in breach of a parenting order. 11 days later, police found tyre tracks and an oil slick near Curio Bay in the Catlins, which was later confirmed to be from the wreckage of Mr Beckenridge's Volkswagen. But no bodies were found in the car and no bodies have ever been found. Today, active Detective Senior Sergeant Stu Harvey said the missing persons case remained open and police were still treating it as a criminal investigation. Mr Harvey said a small team of police are still actively working on the case and they are hopeful the pair are still alive despite no confirmed sightings of the father and son since the 17th of March last year.
Mike's mother's always hoped that he's alive, and as far as I'm aware that continues to today, and our investigative staff are hopeful that that's the case as well. But we're keeping a really open mind about what's actually happened, and we're just going to continue with our investigation until there's no further lines of inquiry. From our point of view, all information that we receive, we investigate, we look into, and we will continue to do that as long as information comes in. And even once the matter goes to the coroner, if that's where it ends up, we will continue to look into any information that we receive.
If they are hiding out there somewhere, then it's likely that someone must have helped them. Has anyone, any person of interest come across your radar or been spoken to?
We've spoken to a lot of people and a lot of friends and associates of John Beckenridge. There's been no information at this stage that we have that would suggest that that's the case, that somebody is helping them.
Stu Harvey says border alerts are still in place and will remain so, but there is no evidence that they have gone overseas. He says evidence suggests they never left the Catlins area. But Ron McQuilter is a private investigator with Paragon Investigations. He's been following the case for the past year. He believes there's a real possibility Mike and his stepfather are still alive because John Beckenridge had 5 aliases and access to several passports. I asked him via Skype video if he'd come across people who disappeared like this for so long.
One chap in a motel in Green Lane, another one in Auckland who have done exactly this, but run off and commit suicide, and I found the bodies. But I haven't found, we haven't found them, so we don't know whether what they've done or if they're still alive. But I have found people who have run off and commit suicide, and I've tracked them to the motel rooms. So as I say, in the absence of any evidence, you have to work on it's a missing persons, not a death suicide.
And if you're a missing person and you don't want to be found and you're able to obtain other identities and other passports, meaning you can travel anywhere in the world under names that people don't know about, how difficult is it to find people in those circumstances?
Well, yeah, it's hard, particularly if you've got lots of identities. I mean, a long time ago, many years ago, I tracked a chap for the believe it or not, the Home Show. A man had run off with his child from Australia to New Zealand, and that was a thing called Baby James, and that took us 2 or 3 months in New Zealand to find that man with his young boy, even though the whole public was looking for him. It still took us 3 months, and he changed his identity, he changed the baby's hair colour. So if you're quite determined, you can disappear for a while, even in New Zealand, I believe.
Ron, how long are you missing for before it just becomes a routine, pro forma, that you are declared dead?
That's a great question, actually. The answer is, in New Zealand, it's typically 7 years, and then a missing person, you would make an application to the court, which is what we did in the case of Lee Shepherd in the North Shore Court. And I had to appear in front of the judge to say what compelling circumstantial evidence we believed he was dead. But for a coroner, to go in front of a coroner, the coroner really only deals when people are dead. So you have to be fairly confident that they're dead. Typically, when there's no body being found, it's typically a thing like a plane crash or a mining disaster. That where you would say the coroner would rule on death. So the short answer is a coroner usually is when you definitely are sure the person is dead. Otherwise, it's a high court and it's typically 7 years.
Private Investigator Ron McQuilter, obviously if anyone has any information whatsoever about where this pair may be, if indeed they are anywhere, please do contact the police. It's coming up to 13 minutes to 6. Native Hawaiians are rejoicing at the return of a feather cloak and helmet gifted to Captain Cook in 1779. A 50-strong delegation from Hawaii attended a pōwhiri at Te Papa today to mark the collection of the traditional treasures. RNZ International's Koro Vakauta was there.
Calling for the return of their treasures, the strikingly colourful ahu'ula and mahiole were a gift from the Hawaiian chief Kalani Opu'u to Captain Cook. The cloak and helmet have been in Te Papa's collection since they were gifted to the National Museum in 1912, but are about to make the long journey home. The chief executive of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, Kamana Opono Crab, says it's an emotional moment for his islands.
In Hawaii we say, "Ta mea nui, he mea nui na I ke mea kupai anaha." It is so tremendous that it is indescribable in terms of the emotion.
Te Papa's Kahotu or Māori leader Arapata Hakiwai says the return of the tonga is a celebration.
The significance really is we're returning these treasures in the same season 237 years later back to Hawaii, and I think for the Hawaiian people that these important treasures have been away from their land for that amount of time, so it's a great celebration to reunite them, to return them to their land and to their people.
Dr. Crab agrees the timing is ideal.
It's really remarkable because when Kalani Opu'u gave that ahu'ula and mahiole to Captain Cook, he was doing makahiki season, the time of lono and peace and agriculture and feasting and harvesting. Right now we are just closing makahiki, so it's almost like the spirits and the ancestors are with us, all the stars are aligned, it's tremendous.
Marcus Hanalei Mazan is a curator at the Bishop Museum where the tonga will go on display later this month. He says it will be displayed in the main hall as a source of inspiration.
This is a moment for reconnections of family members, lineal descendants, to connect back to their kupuna, for visitors and other people from around the world, as well as across the islands, to come and pay their respects to the return of these sacred treasures of Hawaii.
Mr. Marzan says out of all existing ancient Hawaiian featherwork, the taonga are the only ones with an unbroken provenance and lineage. He says the return signifies an ongoing strengthening of the link between Māori and the people of Hawaii.
We are all a large ohana. Even though the ocean separates us, we don't see it as a separation. We see it as the connecting thing that joins us all together. So it is definitely making us stronger, making us feel closer to one another because of these connections that we are making today.
Dr. Hakiwai says although the taonga have officially been loaned to the Bishop Museum for 10 years, there are discussions to extend that or possibly make it permanent.
That's the desire and feeling, and I think with the discussions we've had with the Bishop Museum, and I think that's great because we know that Māori taonga are held in overseas museums as well, and we've started sort of, at some stage we build the relationships that those treasures can come home as well.
Dr. Cramp from the Office of Hawaiian Affairs agrees.
They have a number of taonga Māori there that Bishop Museum will be in discussion, and it's only proper, it's only very Polynesian to aloha aku, aloha mai. When you give, you receive in compassion, and to reciprocate, that is a mea loina, that's a tradition.
The taonga leave New Zealand shores on Sunday and will be exhibited in the Bishop Museum from March the 19th. For Checkpoint, this is Koro Vakauta.
Time now for some feedback. We were talking about marks, fishing marks, before in relation to the case where the man is required to share his mark, lose his mark, whatever, to his employer, his former employer, Sanford. One very nice and interesting piece of feedback. Better Analogies, Radio New Zealand claiming ownership of JC's contact book. And that is a good point because my contact book dates back to 1989. I first started at Radio New Zealand, then I went away for 24 years, and then I came back. So who do my contacts belong to? It's a good question. Went out dragging an oyster dredge in 50 straight for the first time last week, got 50 each, no problem, says Roger, you bugger. It doesn't appear that marks play much part. The beds are fairly easy to find with modern sounders. Besides, there's heaps of boats out there, so it's not hard. My mouth's watering, Roger. If I write a computer program using my knowledge and experience at work, my employer owns it. Why not for fishing marks? Well, that seems to be the employment court's attitude. And as for Fonterra, do the executives of Fonterra receive higher bonuses when the dairy price is low? That would be perverse, says Mike Somerville. I think, Mike, probably their higher bonuses in terms of their profit. And is their profit greater when costs are lower? Well, boy, this is the issue. It's confusing, isn't it? It's also confusing because, of course, the farmers are also shareholders. And that's what Standard & Poor's were grappling with. But they very much side with the fact that Fonterra's responsibility is to their shareholders first and foremost. Thank you all for your feedback. 8 minutes to 6. The conflict that has torn Syria apart and created a refugee crisis not seen in Europe since the Second World War is approaching its 5th anniversary. It began as anti-government protests in the Arab Spring, March 2011. What a spring it wasn't in the end. Since then, half the country's population have been killed or forced to flee their homes. The displaced are everywhere. Manarabi from Reuters met a family in a Jordanian refugee camp, desperate for a chance to finally go home.
Back in 2012, Syrian Huzaifa Hariri was among the first people to marry in Jordan's Za'atari refugee camp. It was bittersweet. He and his bride had hoped to marry in Syria, but the shelling in his neighborhood in Daraa grew worse and the couple fled. They thought they would eventually go back, never imagining they'd still be here at the 5th anniversary of the war. The Syrian conflict started as peaceful protests in 2011, but escalated into an armed uprising against President Bashar al-Assad before turning into all-out civil war. Within a few years, Syria's opposition groups were overtaken by Islamist groups, notably Islamic State, which has taken control of huge swaths of the country for its caliphate. At least 250,000 people are dead, and 14 million thought to be in desperate need of help. Some 4 million others fled Syria, nearly 1.5 million of them taking refuge in Jordan. But it's not home, not for Hariri's father, Ahmed.
Having your family surround you in Syria is special. The familiarity, the lifestyle, everything was different. What can I say?
Hariri's 2 young children were born in the camp, the family among 85,000 Syrians who take refuge here.
My dream is to go back to Syria and raise my children there, to live in the land of our grandfathers, for my children to live in the land of goodness.
But despite ongoing peace talks, the conflict is unresolved. Hariri's dream unlikely to become reality anytime soon.
That report from Reuters. National house sales have hit their highest level in 9 years. The Real Estate Institute says the median house price across New Zealand has increased 5% to $450,000. But what if you can't afford a house, particularly in Auckland, when in February the median house price was $738,000? That's the median. Our reporter Alex Ashton went looking for an answer. He's at the ASB Showgrounds.
The Covey Motorhome and Campervan Super Show, and I'm here with Sean from Traillight, and we're about to have a look inside this, and I'll let you explain what this is.
Yes, this is our flagship motorhome. It's our landmark Owakura 968X.
And how much would one of these set you back? Because looking at it, it's a bit fancy.
Yes, this is our flagship, so this is $340,000.
$340,000, all right. Yeah. Hey, look, Paul, why don't we head in? I'll let you lead the way, and I'll come behind you. So it's a big one.
Yeah, it is. So this is 9 metres long, but of course, in that 9 metres gives you a lot of room to feature all the bells and whistles.
Of course. All right, and you're going to show me some of them, I think.
Yeah, sure.
So I'll
come
let
through.
You take me in. Oh wow! So it's a fully functioning kitchen, dining, lounge, everything, huh?
Yeah, it is. Even features a 40-inch television, so satellite TV, so you can watch Sky, watch the sports and stuff while you're away. We've got a barbecue on the outside. You've got you've got nearly 600 litres of water, so you're not rushing back to town every few days to fill up. Big garage in the back, so you can put all your bikes inside and toys and all that kind of stuff when you're away.
And a full-size bed through there. So it's basically a small apartment, isn't it? It's not something you'd get in Auckland.
Look, absolutely, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to design it as if it was a luxury hotel room or a small apartment, and more our customers are wanting all the features that you would have inside a small apartment. So dishwashers, washing machines, all of the bells and whistles, everything that you'd have at home, but you can take it away with you.
Who might buy one of these, Sean? It's $340,000. It's not. Look, it's not change.
No, it's a lot of money, but when you compare it to a beach house, holiday house, or something like that, I guess it's more affordable. We've got 2 primary customers at the moment, or areas where we're seeing growth. One is in baby boomers, so that's most of our customers. So people who have recently retired, or they're preparing for retirement, and that's a generation who are very aware of their leisure time, the richest generation ever. And for them, retirement isn't a stage where they get old and sit in a chair, comfortable chair. It's a new stage of life. What's the next adventure? And the other area we're seeing is families. So we're seeing a lot of families coming through now, and they're looking for something to go away with the kids and do the cycle trails and kayaking and stand-up paddleboarding and all of that kind of stuff.
Okay. Hey, can we just have a quick squiz through? I want to see the bed.
Yeah, sure.
So, have you sold any today, Sean?
Yeah, we have. We've actually done 4 today, so it's been a really good start of the show for us. We've got another 2 days to go.
Oh, fantastic. Hoping for a few more sales then.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely.
All right, hey, thank you very much.
That's all right.
And all the best for the next couple of days.
Thank you.
Extraordinary. Sold 4 and they're over 300 grand. Alex Ashton, we'll talk to Alex a bit later in the program about what he's seen out there. 5 years after Japan's devastating magnitude 9 earthquake and tsunami, thousands of workers at Japan's Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant are still working to contain the damage. Here's Natasha Howard from Reuters.
Japan's worst nuclear disaster took place on 11th March 2011. A 10-metre high tsunami, triggered by a magnitude 9 earthquake, crashed into the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, causing multiple meltdowns. Now, 5 years on, efforts to contain the damage are still ongoing. Thousands of workers are involved. But plant operator TEPCO says they still don't know how bad the situation is at 3 of the 4 crippled reactors.
It is kind of difficult to say how much we have achieved in terms of percentage, but thinking of the project in mountain climbing terms, if the peak is the 10th station, then we have probably just passed the first station.
The radiation at the plant is still so powerful it is impossible to get inside to find and remove highly radioactive material from melted fuel rods. Water is needed to keep the cleanup going, but the tanks storing the contaminated water are almost full. There's a danger that surrounding groundwater may also become radioactive. Japan is seeking international advice, but decommissioning the reactors is still expected to take 30 to 40 years and cost tens of billions of dollars.
Fukushima 5 years on. That report from Reuters. The news in 25 seconds. Feedback on banks not fronting on the show to discuss not passing on the OCR's cut from the Reserve Bank yesterday. John, the banks don't want to front because it's a bad news story and they have no good excuses. They love to commentate on business matters when it suits them. Not you, unfortunately. Also, it's Friday and they're all playing golf. However, Jeff says he got a 0.1% cut this afternoon. Remember, the OCR went down by 2.5. Kia ora everyone, you are listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm John Campbell. Thank you for joining us. Half an hour left to go in the week, and in it we'll speak to Peter Dunn about cannabis oil for pain relief or restricted drugs. If you have a prescription, you're coming into New Zealand for less than 30 days, is there a loophole? And does that mean people will come and go? The wanted Auckland woman taunting police on Facebook, and how is Vanuatu faring a year on from the devastating cyclone Pam? But before all of that, here's RNZ News with Leilani Mamoisia.
Kia ora, good evening. The Police Minister says she's open to an inquiry into how guns end up in the hands of criminals in New Zealand. The police yesterday seized a cache of weapons, including AK-47s, M16s and a 9mm pistol, during a raid on a massive drug operation in South Auckland. Muriel Baker reports.
There are tight restrictions on the possession of military-style weapons such as AK-47s, and the police say it's a priority of theirs to find out where the guns came from. Judith Collins says she wants a select committee to look into the issue, but says there are other options if that doesn't happen. The Labour Party's police spokesperson, Stuart Nash, is also keen on an inquiry. He says more than 1,500 weapons were confiscated by the police over the past year. This is Muriel Baker.
National house sales have hit their highest level in 9 years as activity surges outside of Auckland. The Real Estate Institute says sales rose 6% to nearly 7,300 in February compared with the same period a year earlier, while the median price increased 5% to $450,000. However, sales fell 18% in Auckland, indicating the effect of tougher rules on investors and foreigners have had an effect. Excluding the Auckland region, sales rose 18% and prices jumped 9% to $383,000. The Institute says the previous regional drivers of the housing market, Canterbury and Auckland, are now playing second fiddle to Waikato, Bay of Plenty, Hawke's Bay and Central Otago Lakes. The Minister for Primary Industries is welcoming an additional $1.6 million in funding for 3 irrigation schemes around the country. The government's Irrigation Acceleration Fund will be putting the money into irrigation projects in Wairarapa, Hawke's Bay and Gisborne. The projects are the proposed Ruataniwha water storage in Hawke's Bay, the Wairarapa water use project and the managed aquifer recharge trial in Gisborne. Nathan Guy says the funding will become the scheme's investment ready.
These are 3 very important water storage projects. One today in the Wairarapa where I've been. They've been doing very good work there in the last 5 years. That's $804,000. In the Ruataniwha, that's $575,000 and $250,000 allocated to the Gisborne project.
Nathan Guy says there is major unrealised potential across New Zealand for more irrigation, and the government has signalled it will invest up to $400 million in irrigation schemes. Mourners have packed Auckland's Holy Trinity Cathedral to farewell cricketing legend Martin Crowe. Crowe died last week, aged 53, after a long battle with lymphoma. Rowan Quinn was at the funeral.
Sporting legends Richard Hadley and Grant Fox were joined by dozens of cricketers from many different eras in a warm service designed by Crowe himself. His famous cousin Russell made an unexpected appearance with his family and helped to carry the bright orange casket from the church. Many of those who spoke talked of Crowe's incredible sporting talent and achievements, but they also spoke of a funny man, a prankster who was passionate and clever. His wife Lorraine said Crowe had taught her what love truly was, and the two of them treasured their time together. His casket was farewelled from the grounds by a haka from his old school, Auckland Grammar. In Auckland, Rowan Quinn.
A fisherman's been told he must share his knowledge of the best fishing spots with his former employer, Sanford, one of the country's biggest fishing companies. John Edmiston, who was the skipper of a bluff oyster dredge for 5 years, says it's his right to keep secret what he's learned during a lifetime of fishing, but the Employment Relations Authority disagrees. Here's our employment reporter, Max Toll.
Mr Edmiston says he used his knowledge of wind, tide and sea conditions and his memory of fruitful areas, or marks, to enter specific coordinates into the dredge's navigation system. When he left, Sanford would only give him a copy of the information. He complained to the authority, and other skippers gave evidence that such information is incredibly valuable and a jealously guarded secret in the industry. However, the authority ruled Sanford was within its rights, because as his former employer it owned the data. This is Max Toll.
Japan is today mourning the thousands who lost their lives in a massive earthquake and tsunami 5 years ago that also triggered the world's worst nuclear disaster since Chernobyl in 1986. The magnitude 9 quake struck offshore, sparking huge waves across a vast swath of coastline and killing nearly 20,000 people. The tsunami crippled the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant, where meltdowns in 3 reactors spewed radiation over a wide area of the countryside, contaminating water, food and air. More than 160,000 people were evacuated from nearby towns. Around 10% still live in temporary housing across Fukushima Prefecture. Some areas remain no-go zones due to the high radiation. Into sports now. After a humiliating season opening performance, the Warriors get the chance to restore some pride when they play the Brisbane Broncos in the National Rugby League tonight. Heavily criticised following their first-up loss to West Tigers, the task doesn't get easier against last season's finalists, but coach Andrew McFadden is optimistic his side can cause an upset.
There's no better place to play than at Suncorp. It's a great venue. It's always a great atmosphere. We always get a good following there, Warriors supporters. And I think, the players on the back half of last week's game, will get a bit of confidence about how we should play.
Kick-off is at 10 p.m. in Brisbane. The New Zealand golfer Stephen Alker has roared up the leaderboard at the New Zealand Open in Queenstown, shooting a 5-under par second round 67 to move into third place. Australian Matthew Griffin had the round of the day with a 7-under 65 to move into a share of first place at 8-under par alongside Japan's Hideto Tanihara. The New Zealand cricketer Corey Anderson says his side can take a lot of confidence from this morning's 74-run win over Sri Lanka. Anderson and Colin Munro both scored half-centuries, while pace bowler Adam Milne took 3 wickets. Anderson says winning by such a large margin is always enjoyable.
Obviously makes it easy with a wicket like Wankiti here is really, really good. So look, if we have a similar kind of thing, hopefully that happens. But look, it could be different guys to step up next game, and it'll be good as well for guys to get time in the middle.
The Black Caps' next warm-up match is against England tomorrow. And that's the news.
Tomorrow morning we will be broadcasting from the St James Theatre in Wellington. It's Writers' Week at the New Zealand Festival. I'll talk to a heap of them from here and overseas, including Christopher McDougall of Born to Run fame, Andrew Hagan, Damien Wilkins, Mallory Ortberg and artists too. So join me, 8 o'clock Saturday morning on RNZ National.
And the Met Service forecast till midnight tomorrow. Northland, showers clearing tomorrow morning, then fine. Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula, a few showers about northern Auckland, Great Barrier Island and eastern Coromandel this evening. Waikato to Kapiti, also Bay of Plenty and the central high country, fine apart from some cloudy periods. Wellington and Gisborne to Wairarapa, scattered showers clearing and becoming fine tomorrow. Nelson and Marlborough, except the Kaikoura coast, fine apart from a few showers about Golden Bay today. Kaikoura coast and Canterbury, showers clearing from the south today and becoming fine. Otago and Southland, fine apart from cloud about the Catlins and Dunedin until tonight. Bulla to Fiordland, isolated showers about northern Bulla, cloudy periods tomorrow and a few showers about Westland and Fiordland. Chatham Islands, showers, some heavy and gale southwesterlies easing tomorrow. And it's now 6:09.
Thank you very much, Leilani. Have a fantastic weekend.
You too.
See you Monday. The use of cannabis for medicinal purposes has sparked debate, with high-profile New Zealanders Martin Crowe and Helen Kelly have used the drug for pain relief. It's illegal to possess, use or import cannabis into New Zealand, but the Misuse of Drugs Act has an exemption for people wanting to bring in drugs for medicinal purposes. The law states that a person may bring any controlled drug into New Zealand with them if it's for their own medicinal use and it was legally supplied to them overseas for their treatment and it is no more than 1 month's worth of treatment. So if someone gets a prescription for cannabis oil while overseas, for example, they're allowed to bring a 1 month supply into the country with them for their own personal use, it seems. The drug is already legal for medicinal use in several American states, and both Queensland and Victoria in Australia do expect to legalise it in the next year or so. So if sick people can bring it into the country, why can't they get it here? The Associate Health Minister, Peter Dunn, is with us on the line. Welcome.
Thank you, John. Nice to be with you.
Yeah, nice to be with you too. Are you enjoying this? Because I read something, an interview that Russell Brown did with you in Vice, where you just looked thoroughly between a rock and a hard place, having a miserable time and unable to please anyone. In this...
I'm not having a miserable time, but this is a very difficult issue. And it's a difficult issue for the very simple reason that the game is rapidly moving. And what I've been trying to do is position New Zealand so that when things become a little clearer, we're able to take advantage of what's happening. Now, give you an example. Australia has just made it possible to conduct clinical trials there for the purposes of assessing whether or not certain products can proceed.
Absolutely.
You can do that already in New Zealand. The problem is no one has expressed any interest or desire to do so. So we end up sort of looking as though we're running to catch up, but in actual fact we're no worse off than our colleagues across the Tasman.
Are we running to catch up, or are we just running round and round and round in circles?
No, I don't think we're running round and round in circles.
It does, we are starting to look, aren't we, anachronistic? We're starting to look as if we are out of touch with two things. One, the fact that this drug is a reality in New Zealand life already, full stop. And two, that it does seem to work for people like Helen Kelly and Martin Crowe.
I think we need to make a very clear distinction though, John. We're not talking about leaf cannabis.
I couldn't agree more. Sorry, so you're right. Let's move on. So Helen Kelly and Martin Crowe are saying, actually, this worked for us really well.
Yeah, well, look, I'm not going to talk about particular individual cases. In one case, we don't have the evidence. In another case, the oncologist actually withdrew the application because he didn't think it was necessary to proceed. There are procedures in place which we can go through as to how people can get access to this, and I think the first thing I would say is that people need to talk immediately to their doctors and to seek their advice and their help, because there are steps that can be taken under the Medicines Act. Go back to your introduction. It is, as you say, possible for people to bring in 1 month's supply of any controlled drug for their own treatment, but there are some big caveats on that. It has to be given to them or prescribed to them when they are overseas, so you can't do it by mail order, for instance. And it can only be for 1 month, so you can't get a repeat of it. And the other thing, too, I don't think this is a huge problem in respect of the United States, because there's some doubt there about whether you would actually be able to bring the product out of the United States, because there are federal bans, even though there are state legalisations. So just to finish this very quickly, the real issue for us will be Australia.
Victoria, Queensland, they're looking to legalise, and so all of a sudden the playing field is no longer level, and New Zealanders go back and forth across the Tasman, sometimes in the same day, right?
Yeah, I think that's unlikely, John, for this reason. It's probably 2 years or so away before any trial results.
Even so, are we going to sit? Are we simply going to sit here and wait to see what the Australians do?
I'm just going to make the point that if products are approved in Australia, subject to all other things being equal, they will almost certainly be approved for use in New Zealand. So the issue of going back and forward, as you suggest, isn't likely.
So what are you saying? So what are you saying there? Because that seems
what I'm saying is
you seem to be putting a little toe in the water there. So what?
No, what I'm saying is that there are clinical trials that produce viable products in Australia that the Therapeutic Goods Agency approves as being able to be prescribed. It's very likely that MedSafe here would follow suit. We do that in a number of areas where anyway we work complementary.
Very likely? Very likely?
I can't judge in advance of what a particular product would be, but it would be my expectation that all other things being equal, that would be the case.
Can I ask you your personal opinion? Do you think that would be appropriate and reasonable and right?
Subject to the normal standards, yes.
Okay, so in fact this situation, which is now starting to look farcical because you have people self-medicating illegally and everyone is just ignoring the fact, and I suspect 99.9% of the public are just hoping the police never turn up at their homes. So this is a ridiculous state of affairs. You think this may be finite, that this could potentially be resolved by us importing what the Australians are doing within the next couple of years?
Well, whenever the Australians, because they're likely to be first cab off the rank in our part of the world, get approved product, I think it is very likely that that product would be approved for use in New Zealand. I can't prejudge the outcome of those clinical trials. They're about, as I say, 2 years off completion. But I think that would be a very likely step forward. In the meantime, I just want to make this point. I do not expect, and it's not my responsibility anyway, but I do not expect the police or the authorities to be running around persecuting people who are using cannabis sourced illegally.
So the question is, why can't we just let them use it? Why? And in fact, I like to. Because that comes back to the leaf and all of that. So let's come back to the exemptions you've granted. How many people have you given permission to use some form of cannabis-based medicine?
I have had one application, and that was the Renton case. And the Renton case I approved.
Okay. Now, Helen Kelly put an application in, but she withdrew it. And my understanding is that her oncologist withdrew it because he felt like he was jumping through so many.
Look,
and in fact, he was being asked to prove efficacy. Well, how on earth can you prove efficacy before you're using the drug?
No, what he was asked to do, as was the clinicians in the Renton case, was to be able to give some evidence that the drug they were seeking to prescribe was likely to be effective for their patient. I mean, a doctor who prescribes something to you for arthritis, for instance, would make that call and would know that this drug would work. So I don't think it's an unreasonable call.
Yeah, but the question is, how does he prove it? I mean,
well, in the Kelly case, the oncologist became convinced that the product that is legally available in New Zealand, Sativex, was sufficient, and at that point he withdrew the application.
Okay, which is confusing because Sativex, my understanding is that it's for spasms and all of that, for convulsions.
Well,
it's not pain relief, right? It's not pain relief, which is what Helen Kelly and Martin Crowe were using cannabis for.
I'm not going to make the clinical judgment. He became satisfied that that was an alternative. Now,
okay.
She chose not to use it, her right. He then at that point said, well, I'm not prepared to proceed with an application.
Okay. Having said that, we've made headway here, which is really exciting. So you think that in 2 years' time, the very real possibility is we will no longer be having this discussion?
I've been saying this for over a year, John, that this is exactly what I think would happen. This would be the course of action. I've also said on several occasions that if manufacturers were to come forward offering or expressing an interest in conducting clinical trials in New Zealand, we would be very supportive of that. But the sad, hard reality is they do not see sufficient market opportunity here. And therefore we have to rely on these tests because we can't put products that are untried, unsafe onto the market. If we do and they fail, we wear the liability. So we have to rely on good test results. The most likely prospects at the moment are those being proposed in Australia, and we're certainly following that very closely. I was in Australia talking to Australian ministers about this last week.
Associate Health Minister Peter Dunn, thank you very much indeed for your time this evening. We really appreciate it. It's 18 minutes past 6. An Auckland woman currently breaching home detention is using social media to taunt the police. In a Facebook post, County's Manukau police said they were searching for Dana Paparoa. Ms Paparoa herself then commented on the post, taunting police for not being able to find her and posting a photo on her own Facebook page of herself sitting on the bonnet of a police car. County's Manukau Police Inspector Dave Glossop says Ms Paparoa should get off Facebook, stop wasting their time and hand herself in.
Before people go on our Facebook page, I think it's important for your listeners to understand that that's not our first option. We actually, make all the necessary inquiries to try and locate somebody. So when we do put them on Facebook, it's a genuine effort to stop bugging their family and friends who we're chasing them through, and it's to focus on them, doing the right thing and coming and seeing us. But when we have people like her who say that, we're not doing our job or we're doing something wrong, well, we then actually challenge them, if it's appropriate to say, well, come and talk to us then. Let's resolve this. But we do get the odd idiot out there who thinks it's catch me if you can, and they start sending ridiculous comments, and we don't buy into that.
Okay, so what? Ms Paparoa was wearing a bracelet, was she?
Oh, look, I think the conversation here is around, the fact why we responded and the fact that we do put people on Facebook. Because she's wanted by us, it's not really appropriate to go into her exact details, but it's people like her that take up a lot of our time to try and locate them, and would just be easier. New Zealand's a really small country. We catch people eventually all the time. We just really want people to just, man up and come and see us.
Okay, so she disappears without trace.
Yeah.
You then go to her family, to all the people, and they say, hey, stop hassling us, leave us alone. Does that happen in this situation?
It does. We don't mean to hassle people. We don't get kicks out of that. But it's our job to locate people. Like in the lady you're just talking about, who's breached home detention. We're duty bound to bring her back before the courts. And if we know she's living at an address, then we're going to keep going back to the address until we get them. People get peeved off with us and complain that why you keep coming back here. Well, the answer is actually damn obvious. Get the person to face up, or we have to keep coming back. It's not a case of we're going to give up.
Have you heard from her lately, other than to take a photo of herself sitting on a police car and criticise your inability to find her?
No, and we're not going to buy into that. She's one of many people that we're trying to locate at any time. But people come and go. And when we do catch up with them, they just pretty much feel dumb for the actions they've taken.
Inspector Dave Glossop from County's Manukau Police. It is 21 minutes past 6. Coming up on World Watch PM at 6:30 with Elizabeth Brown. Support surges for an anti-immigration party in Germany and a surprising discovery in a woman's hand luggage. All of that coming up in 8.5 minutes. It's nearly a year since Cyclone Pam hit Vanuatu with winds gusting up to 250 kilometres an hour. The cyclone killed 15 people, destroyed homes, wiped out crops, flattened schools, communities, you name it. World Vision's Mike Wolfe moved to Vanuatu a fortnight before Cyclone Pam struck. He told me how the country is faring a year on.
Vanuatu still smiles. Vanuatu is continuing to get on and do what Vanuatu does, and you get out to those communities, and the communities are continuing to get on with their lives. They're continuing to smile with great exuberance and great joy.
Which is remarkable in the circumstances, because if you go to an island like Tanna, for example, people lost everything they had. They lost their homes, they lost their gardens, they lost the coffee plantations there, the vanilla plantations, whatever. So they lost the subsistence existence they had, but they also lost their income. How can they be so resilient?
That's a great question. They are. How can they be so resilient? Look, I flew down to Tanna the day after the cyclone, and I couldn't believe what I saw. Just no leaves on the trees, and these boughs have been snapped. These huge trees, the boughs have been snapped, and I was thinking, how did anybody survive this? And World Vision had 12 staff on the ground in Tanna, and I just kept thinking, I wonder if my staff made it through the cyclone. But they did.
The other thing I think that you were taken aback by, and I know that the NGOs in Vanuatu have been taken aback by, was the support from New Zealand, right?
Oh, yeah.
So New Zealanders seem to really connect with Vanuatu after Pam. Tell me the kind of money that you got from New Zealand.
Yeah, well, it's been huge. And I mean, I've been going around this week talking to people in New Zealand, and people say, oh, well, look, it's our neighborhood. So we love the Pacific. It's part of our backyard. So look, one thing that I was really encouraged by, even though the Aussies outnumber the Kiwis 5-1 in population, New Zealand's given more money to World Vision for our Cyclone Pam response than Australia has, and that's pretty phenomenal.
And why do you think that is?
I think Kiwis are generous. I think this is your backyard. I think there's a spirit of we're part of the Pacific. It's been a hard year for Vanuatu. It's been massive natural disaster, right? Like the World Bank estimates the damages from Cyclone Pam are around $500 million, which is half the GDP of the country.
That's right. The GDP is $1 billion.
It's massive, right? Yeah. And in the midst of that, what is government doing? Government has been coordinating the aid efforts to make sure that we don't have duplication, to make sure that different actors and different agencies are being able to go where they're going to be most effective. Government has been able to continue to provide services in partnership with other development partners as it can, and government has been able to make sure that it coordinated the entire Cyclone Pam response.
How's the horticulture going? Are things growing back again? I mean, obviously things grow very, very fast.
When there's rain.
Yeah, when there's rain, right.
Yeah, look, it's been an El Nino drought, and in some places crops have failed 3 or 4 times, and it's been really, really hard. So look, the World Vision staff have been working on long-term development projects before Cyclone Pam for agriculture and economic development, water, sanitation, hygiene, and our staff have continued as they've been working throughout the emergency response. And as they've been working after the emergency response, they've been working to check how things are going in those communities and to see what are the next steps that can be done to try to help those communities get on with their lives.
Okay. You began this interview by talking about their remarkable resilience in Vanuatu. Let's end it by talking about what they still need. What do they still need?
It's long-term development, mate. So we're back to doing all of the things that were true before Cyclone Pam. Those things are still true after Cyclone Pam. So you still have communities where it's really, really hard to have service delivery. It's really hard to get in vaccinations. It's really hard to provide water and sanitation services. It's really hard to provide basic health services. It's really hard to provide schools, right? And so all of these fundamental development needs, they're still there. It's a year on from Cyclone Pam, and things have become, in some ways, much more complex and much more challenging. But the World Vision staff are back in the communities doing those long-term projects that they were doing before Cyclone Pam and building that trust with community members so that changes will happen in the thinking and in the world views of communities, so that communities will want to improve their own sanitation. Communities will want to change their hygiene practices. That's what's still going on.
Cyclone Pam, Vanuatu, a year on. Let's head back to the Motorhome and Super Show now. Nikki and Campbell Sturrock have sold their home in the Auckland suburb of Otahuhu to take their EcoBus on the road. The Sturrocks bought the bus for $21,000, have spent about $100,000 kitting it out. Our reporter Alex Ashton is on board.
We're in Auckland at the Motorhome Super Show, and we are in the Loop bus.
And what is the Loop bus?
Well, the Loop bus is a sustainably built bus that's going to travel the country for a year, and our family is going to contribute to the communities by tree planting and doing beach cleanups and listening for kiwi and that kind of thing. And when we built the bus, we were looking at all the different products that we could find that would do no harm. So people, planet, profit was our framework, and it's not as easy as you think. There's no shoes in New Zealand that do no harm. We had to get our shoes from Australia. So there's stuff like that. So when we were learning, like our carpet is made out of old fishing nets from the Philippines.
Yeah.
So it's ghost nets that last for 600 years and just basically indiscriminately kill marine life that they're now turning into carpet. So, which is awesome, right? So they're paying fishermen to actually fish for the ghost nets, which means that their fish stocks go up and it gives them another revenue stream, and that's sustainable, and that's what we were looking for.
Cool.
And then be able to just, promote those kinds of things.
Hey, well, can someone show me around where you're going to be spending the next year?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Do you want to get up and go?
Okay.
Right.
So it's going to be tight?
Yeah, it's a tight...
It's luxury.
That's our open plan living and dining area. So our kitchen... We've used macrocarpa, natural oils. All of our cooking and our heating for our buses run on biodiesel, New Zealand made biodiesel from Canterbury, from Green Fuels. So the bus is running on biodiesel. We have no gas. We only have biodiesel or electricity from the sun. We've got solar panels on the roof. We've got things like top loading fridge, which is super efficient. Cold air falls downwards, right? So when you open a normal fridge, all the cold air falls out. Makes you use more energy, so we are holding that cold air in the fridge, and it makes us more energy efficient, so we can run that fridge only on electricity from the sun.
And there's 5 of you in here. Where are you all going to sleep?
Oh, come down. Reefy, where are you, mate? Here he is. Oh, for the special occasion, you can leave them on. Jump in your bed, quick! Jump in your bed, go! In your bed.
Oh wow, so you're all along here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how long have you actually been in here so far?
We had breakfast
in here this morning, so we drove it out of the workshop at 6 o'clock this morning, and we're hoping to have our first night as a family in here tonight. So.
Oh, fantastic. And so you're going to be here for the next few days, and then where next after that?
We're here till Sunday, and then we're off to Levin's, our next stop, to the New Zealand Motor Caravan Association's 60th anniversary rally, because they're launching their sustainability strategy there. We're sort of central to that with the partnership, and we want to be there to support them in their goals of making a difference, with their 65,000 members making a difference as they're out and about, enjoying New Zealand's beautiful environment and spending money in local communities and that sort of thing.
All right, well, all the best, guys. And we'll go...
Actually, one last thing. Did you see our electric car?
No,
well,
I
our
didn't.
electric car drives on sunshine.
Okay, well...
So sun fuel is just straight out there.
I'll get you to show me after this, eh? Hey, so these guys are going to be here for the next few days, and they're off for the next year, and I'm sure they're going to have a wee adventure.
Alex Ashton having a wee adventure himself. We've got 27 seconds to go, so I'm going to tell you what Kim Hill's up to tomorrow. From 9 till 11, she'll be broadcasting live from the upper foyer of the St James, Wellington, Courtney Place, of course, for Writers and Readers Week at the New Zealand Festival. She's got some great guests. Andrew O'Hagan, most probably best known for his fiction, but I love his non-fiction. The Missing is sublime. Damien Wilkins, I'm really looking forward to reading his new novel. Kim Hill tomorrow morning. That'll be a special show. Nat Rad. See you Monday.
RNZ News headlines. The police minister says she's open to an inquiry into how guns end up in the hands of criminals in New Zealand. National house sales have hit their highest level in 9 years, although Auckland has fallen. A fisherman has been told he must share his knowledge of the best fishing spots with his former employer Sanford. And mourners have packed Auckland's Holy Trinity Cathedral for the funeral of cricketing legend Martin Crowe. More news and weather at 7.
Welcome to World Watch PM. I'm Elizabeth Brown. Tonight, a surge in support for an anti-immigration party in Germany, no let-up on the migrant trail, and a surprising discovery in a woman's hand luggage. Those stories and more in World Watch PM.